Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call the regular meeting of North Central Texas College Community College District to order. The first item of business is the roll call announcement. We have established a quorum. Thanks to everybody for their attendance this evening. Item number 2 would be the special recognition. Dr. Wallace.
Thank you. I would like to congratulate the college for the submission of Aspire to be Hired as we submitted that, and we were judged a top 10 bellwether finalist in the category of instructional programs and services. This is a nationally recognized bellwether award focusing on cutting-edge, trending programs worthy of replication across the United States. Annually, 30 community colleges are deemed finalists from a large group of applicants in the United States and its territories, and the selected colleges compete for one of 3 final awards. And so we'll be presenting those in the next few weeks, but would you join me in congratulating our faculty staff for working? And Shannon Solomon's here. She's been involved in that. So I think Shannon's here. Where are you, Shannon? Are you here? She may not have made it quite yet. But anyway, that is the Aspire to be Hired, I remind you, is our quality enhancement plan. And so to have national recognition there, and it's kind of like the Oscars, even just to be nominated is a pleasure. So secondly, the NCTC English Department and its first-year composition program has been announced as the winner of the 2023 Diana Hacker TYCA Award for Outstanding Programs in English. This is a nationally recognized award, and it is the highest honor given to English departments at any 2-year college in the United States. In 2017, the English department faculty worked together, if you remember, to develop its textbook project, writing its own textbook course materials, and developing online resources, hosting on-campus lecture events, and promoting faculty professional development. And as a result, the English department has demonstrated an impressive and sizable increases to student achievement and success over the past 5 years. The 2-year College Association will recognize the NCTC English Department at its 2023 conference in February in Chicago, and a description of the award-winning program will be published in the Teaching English in 2-Year College national publication and a national 2-year journal. And so I have to just say we continue to be impressed by that work. Dean Rochelle Gregory, Chair Kristen Weinzappel, and some of our English faculty are with us tonight, and if they'd stand, we'd love to just say congratulations to them. So I just, again, so many exciting things, and honestly, to have national recognition at the college for several of our working new innovations that we're doing is really impressive. So congratulations to those groups.
Got to turn it on. Hello? Okay, thank you very much for that report. The next item would be item 3 is the citizens that desire to address the board. Sandy, do we have anyone this evening? Okay, thank you. Item number 4 is the Chancellor's report. Dr. Wallace.
It's me again. At your places this evening, board members, is a blue folder, and those are documents associated with my report for you, and I would like you to take these a little bit out of order from what's on the agenda, because I want to start with our community college days at the Capitol. The Texas Association of Community Colleges hosted Community College Day at the Capitol on January 26, 2023, and this event allows community college students to have the opportunity to directly engage with our state senators and our local representatives. And students heard from higher education leaders, they interacted with state leadership, learned how to effectively advocate for education. With us this evening are the students who attended that with several of us. I was fortunate to get to work with all these students, and they were wonderful representatives of us. I'm going to ask them all to stand individually, and then we'll recognize them here in just a moment. But Ben is from our Flower Mound campus. We have Brian, Gainesville Red River Promise student. We have, stay standing, Ben, don't sit down. I'm so sorry. Chloe is with us from Gainesville Red River Promise. I don't know if she made it tonight. We have Denton from Gainesville campus. Denton is, so by the way, Ben's going to be a business major. Denton is working on kinesiology. We have Edith. Edith is from Red River, from our ERA school district, but Edith is working in criminal justice and specifically sexual crime division work. She's excited about putting an end to the trafficking problem that the state of Texas has. We have Jose with us. Jose is excited about a career in social service and psychology kind of background. He's from our Denton campus, and we're glad to have him. We have Matthew. Matthew's from Flower Mound and Corinth. They may not be able to join us. And then Parker Hillis, who may not be here because I think the athletes have another commitment, but he is a Gainesville baseball student who is working on a career in information technology degree. I am so proud of these young people. They walked alongside us, they heard from and they communicated their plans to our legislature. They were excited about the vision of their future, and it was rewarding to sit by them and listen to them. And we are made aware every day of the importance of our students. These students standing represent who we are and why we're here. And I would argue that they have done a beautiful job of representing the North Central Texas College District. So would you please give a huge round of applause to these individuals. And they're just a pretty fun crew, I'll just say. They did great. The final version of recommendations from the Commission on Community College Finance is in your packet this evening in my board presentation. I've included that for you to just have the final version. We've talked about it. I don't plan any further conversation this evening about it, otherwise to just say that's in front of you. It's approved by TAC. It is approved by, so the Texas Association of Community Colleges, it's approved by the Texas Community College Teachers Association, and it is approved by the Community College Association of Texas Trustees, along with the commission itself. I have covered this in the past, but I just wanted to provide you the latest edition of that. If approved, NCTC will stand to have significant additional state support due to the overwhelmingly significant work we've done in pathways and keeping students on track for completion. So we're excited about this new innovative approach to funding, and we hope that it will continue to be working toward that. I have been traveling to Austin frequently as an officer of TAC, but also to make sure of a positive position for North Central Texas College, and I'm very pleased with the narrative we received last week from the Senate Finance Committee and their compliments of the work of community colleges. It was a hard day for higher ed, I would argue. If you rewatch any of that, there were a lot of questions. But the community college systems came away with compliments from most of the senators that were speaking and appreciated our willingness to be held accountable for completion in the future. And so any questions about that, let me know. I'll be glad to answer those. Over the next several months, as a part of my report, I would like to begin to provide data relative to our rural-based campuses. Specifically, I would like to cover in the next few months the counties in which we garner a tax dollars, maintenance tax dollars, and or support by other taxing mechanisms. Tonight I'm going to be covering Cook County in two ways, and I'm going to have a presentation that will be before you. If Alex, if I can remember how I'm doing everything, we're going to see if it works and see how it works. Tonight I'll be covering Cook County in two ways. The work and success thus far of the Red River Promise Program, I think, is something you need to be made aware of. And then secondly, I would like to cover some trends that we're seeing in educational attainment and then job, career, in high demands for the upcoming years for Cook County. Now we'll be covering, after that, we'll be covering Montague, and then we will cover Young County in the future to go those. These are the same counties that I remind you we've been working on with the Red River Promise campaign. And again, our Red River Promise program, I think Edith, you were Red River, I believe, is one of those that went with us. I think Brian was one of those. There's several that have been involved in that. So you have real testimony. But what I would argue is this is some data, and it is just that. In your books this evening, or in your packet I gave you, the blue notebook, is a more detailed dive into this. These are highlights. But economically, I see our city manager here. Appreciate Barry being here because you might like some of this data as well, Mr. City Manager. We have shared this. The mayor has a copy of this, and also the EDC has a copy of this for Gainesville. But 42,000 plus population now in Cook County. That's a 2,800 person population growth. We can get into the details of that. I think what's important is 16,000 regionally employed. That grew by about 75 jobs or 75 positions over 5 years. But then median household income is still steady at 62,000 and change. Why is that important? Well, we are always looking as a college at how we underscore and build up local economy and workforce. And so what that translates to is our next level is what we want to look at is what is the educational attainment that is occurring in Cook County specifically. Concerning that, 13.3% of Cook County residents possess a bachelor's degree or higher. Now, as you look at the chart, I want to be mindful that this is cumulative in effect. So in other words, if you wanted to determine who has a high school diploma or at least, you would add all combined areas up to that high school diploma, if that makes sense. So you would add the 1,400 that have less than ninth grade. It accumulates. There's no two spots in which you would be in. When you look at some college, that could be a multitude of things. It could be a career and technical program that you did that was not a full associate. It could be dual credit. It could be you started and swirled. It could have numerous reasons. But if you begin to look at that, so 56% of our population have a high school diploma or some college. 13% have the bachelor's degree, which is 7% below the national level. We'd like to see that shifting. But 9.3 of associates, which is about par with national average, but we would like to see, of course, all that improve over time. But it's just an interesting study. Which that leads to is a video I'd like to share that really talks about our Red River, and we'll go from that one next.
If it wasn't for the Red River program, I wouldn't even be attending college right now because I just couldn't afford it.
Without it, I really wouldn't have been able to fund my college. I'm not really in a situation to where my parents can really help me out. It was either I was going to pay for it all or really not go.
When I was in high school, I was thinking about college and I was super nervous on how I was going to pay for it. And like I said, I am the oldest of 6 kids, and my dad is also a pastor, so money was something that I was going to have to figure out on my own. But because of the Red River Promise, it gave me that security of not having to worry about finances.
One of the primary factors that industry looks at for selecting a site in a community is talented workforce, a skilled workforce, a trained workforce. And if we don't have that, we don't have one of the primary criteria that they're using to select sites.
The goal being to, take out any barrier for any person who wants to go to community college, take every barrier out, not just financial, but the assistance in filling out FAFSA, transcripts, getting those from your school.
The faculty and staff at NCTC are incredible, and they can help you with whatever questions you may need. The ladies in the admissions office, the enrollment guides, are literally superheroes that don't wear capes. They know the FAFSA like the back of their hand.
It's been wonderful. Everybody here is wonderful. All the staff and everything, they're just very helpful.
I think academically I've done a lot better than I did in high school because I have many more resources and I think a lot more help and support, and it's been really awesome.
This gives existing industry and future companies a chance to support the pipeline that they need for their business to be successful.
If our community is going to grow like we think is going to happen over the next 20 to 30 years, having this institution training our employees will bring in better businesses and help our town grow the right way, so I feel like that's important.
So if I could tell my younger self one thing, I would say don't be scared. The people at NCTC have your back and you're going to make it through it.
It's not scary anymore because I'm here and I've loved it and I've met so many new friends. I'm just so grateful for this opportunity.
If it really wasn't for the people who were so very kind enough to donate and take the time to really look into the program and just fund it and stuff, I wouldn't be here. So I'm actually very thankful for everyone who actually took the time and thought about everyone who could actually deserve a chance at college.
Embarrassingly, I didn't try as hard as I should have in high school because I kind of had this idea of it doesn't matter because I'm not going to make it. To have this gift handed to you, now I have motivation and drive to do something and be something, and I can do it. And it doesn't matter what it was in high school because now I'm crushing it.
So anytime, yes. Of course, anytime we get to hear from our students, it's rewarding, and Edith's going to have to sign autographs at the end of the evening for you. I want to briefly go through our school districts independently, and this has been offered and has been given to our superintendents each, but I just think you need to see the impact that the Red River Promise program is doing for our student population. In Callisburg, I want you to look at scholarship applications have improved by 733%. Now, I know that's a small number overall, but that is a significant number for a small rural community-based ISD. Retention is where we worry the most. As a college, we want to know if first year into Red River, if we're retaining those individuals. And I'm going to give a shout out here in just a moment, but this is a lot of staff work. This is a lot of work on behalf of high school counselors getting them in, but then once they're here, it is a lot of work to say, how do we retain? And bluntly, we face every year with a cohort of students those that don't do well, and to still retain a good percentage is important. But FAFSA completion, that's helping meet not only our goal to get them FAFSA complete, but that's also now mandated for every high school graduate before they leave high school. ERA, again, increased retention there, a 375% increase in scholarship application. College applications have gone up 100%. That's college applications to NCTC. Remember that the Promise program also incorporates some of our university partners, but this is just our data you're looking at this point. But very exciting about the increased numbers, too, of community, and let me be mindful as I go back on, look at the community service hours these students are providing. This is not a free program. They have stake in the game. They have to do some things. And so the 439 community service hours is pretty impressive as you continue. Gainesville Independent School District, 500% scholarship application increase. College applications have increased. Retention is at a good level. We continue to see success there. Lindsay, same thing to be said. Now, you know, there are always and continue to always be students whose trajectory is straight into the university. That doesn't hurt anything. That's fine. But we need to understand the impact we're making, and I'll be honest with you, I think here in a minute I have this, but we're seeing an increased number of students taking advantage of technical programs straight out of high school that would have been, and you heard some of them say, I wasn't going to come at all. One of our students that went with us to Austin that's not able to be with us this evening, Brian, was telling his story. Brian is a welding student at NCTC Gainesville, a Gainesville ISD graduate who did dual credit, but then said, I didn't realize I had this opportunity to go ahead and do a full degree in industrial technology, and that's where we're seeing this impacting lives. Munster, again, smaller school districts, their numbers don't inflate as much, but still very significant increases there. And then Sacred Heart is also in our Promise program, a private school, but very important to this region, and significant retention there has been 100%. Small numbers, they're not a large school, but very important for us. Valley View, again, 520% increase in applications. Just 329 hours, 73% of the students pledged. And so overall, if you look at this, enrollment, 80% increase. And then retention, an 87% increase in retention of our 7% retention rate for those. And then 30% technical, and then 70% academic. So that's about the normal spread for NCTC. And this is really imperative that we recognize Barbara, if you would stand, and your staff on Red River, all of you ladies stand. Thank you. Because it's a lot of work. And it's a lot of work at the high schools. And so now that leads me to the final portion of my report, which has to do with where we're looking in the future for programs of study. What is the technical driving force for Cook County in the future? And we're fortunate that our labor force participation hasn't really shifted a whole lot in the last few years. It hovers in the 58 to 60% range. But what we are seeing is an increased number of retiring soon numbers. So what we're seeing is that there are about 7,500 millennials in Cook County. There are about 13,800 that are planning to retire soon. And so we've got a workforce that's going to need that next level step up. I think there's a comment going on, but I can't see. But anyway, what it proves to us is the importance of some of our technical programs as we look to the future, and our academic to move up, because those are moving up from one have to move up, and it's a chain of events. But that means it's interesting as well. We did some demographic studies about the migration rates, and honestly, Cook County had a surplus over this study of 800 people that was a surplus to the area, and that's been impressive to us. And if you notice, there's even previous counties of living. You see California at the bottom of that list. Because we are having individuals moving to the state of Texas and Cook County, and so the migration actually was a plus benefit to Cook County. Industry characteristics. These are our largest industries as we currently see it. So that's why you've seen our NCTC instructional staff adding programs in manufacturing. We have retail trade. We're working on food service. We have construction. Those are our biggest industries now. When you look at the next chart, what's growing and what is the future industry, you see construction, you see healthcare, so ADN, RN, LVN, phlebotomy, all of those fall into that case. Healthcare and social work. Professional, scientific, technical services are growing, financial services, and then again, entertainment. Whether that's hotel management or accommodations and food service continues to grow, and these are what are projected as the biggest growing industries in the next few years to come for Cook County. And so, workforce characteristics, the largest occupations are similar to what you saw. And so we're excited because the cohort for this year continues to be successful with Red River. We're looking forward to the days ahead as far as new programs that we're already developing. You're seeing us working on programs that include farm to table, where we are working on not only our agricultural programs and how they join with culinary. We're also seeing we now have a fully developed CDL license program, both here in Cook County and in Denton. We now have a lot of those things we're adding, and it's based off these data of what the next level. And the funding mechanism I spoke to earlier, these are fundable programs, these are critical field programs, so the funding will be even further increased as we move toward fulfilling these. Lots of data, I know, but you have it. If you have questions now or if you have questions down the road, please let me know. But I think it's important for us to look at that, and next month we'll be looking at Montague County and their success rates with Red River and their future projections. Questions? Hearing none, I appreciate your time, Madam Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. The next item on our agenda is the informative reports from the board subcommittees. And first, before I start that, I'd like to just take a second and say thank you very much to the people that chair those committees, plus the board members that serve on those committees. For those of you that may not realize, we actually have 4 committees. The Executive Committee, which I chair, the Finance Committee is chaired by Regent Morris, the Building and IT Committee is chaired by Mr. Grime, Regent Grime, and the Student Success Committee is chaired by Mr. Henderson. And it takes a lot of extra time to be prepared and come to those committee meetings to look over all of the important information that's shared and ask the very important questions of the folks that are helping us gather that information and presenting to our committees. And so I wanted to say thank you, because it really is important work that we do and makes these board meetings extremely effective, I think, and allows the public to, of course, all the decisions are made right here in the boardroom. But the information that we gain there helps us be more educated and make good decisions on behalf of everyone here at the institution, students included for sure. So I wanted to say thank you. And the first particular report that I'd like to have is from the Executive Committee, and we did not meet. So the next one would be the Finance Committee, Regent Morris.
The Finance Committee did meet. We met January 25th. First thing we discussed was maintenance tax notes. We had a presentation from Specialized Public Finance, which you'll hear from later in the meeting, regarding the possible sale of maintenance tax notes to fund facility improvements here on the Gainesville campus. We also reviewed a list of possible projects. Then we talked about a reimbursement resolution related to the issue of those notes, which will come to the agenda later. We reviewed the first quarter investment report, the November financials, the December financials, which Dr. Miller will discuss, and then we adjourned. We also did have a quick meeting in December to talk about the audit, and I believe Judy is here to discuss that.
Want to go ahead and do that now? Okay, very good.
So each of you should have a copy of the audit. I'll just go over a couple of the highlights, and if you have any questions, please stop me. So if you'll turn to page 11, it's our statement of net position, and there's a comparison with the previous year. And you know, your accounting is kept on the fund basis, but when we do the audit report, we have to consolidate all the funds. So this is a consolidated presentation, which is kind of makes it hard for you to relate to, but I'll point out a couple of things that might help you. Fund balance, total net position is the last figure on the page, and you can see unrestricted is a negative $10 million. And we've talked about this before, but you have to record a liability to record your portion of the state's pension, unfunded pension, and post-employment benefits as well. And those figures, they're scattered out on the balance sheet, but they total to $35 million. So your fund balance is lowered $35 million because you have to record those liabilities. And those are liabilities that you're not having to pay out of pocket, because you pay on a monthly basis the employee retirement system based on your payroll. But these are figures that are determined actuarially, that if everybody went out of business, this is what you would be on the hook for. Also, we had to record, there was a new accounting pronouncement this year that we have to capitalize your leases and show the net present value of the lease payments as a liability. So we have to show the asset, and we have to depreciate it, then we have to show the liability. And those, it was called right-to-use leases. That entry lowered your fund balance by $1,195,000 because you have a lot of leases. So those are two things that kind of, I'm not going to say artificially lowered your fund balance, but sort of, kind of. That's $36 million. If you'll turn over to page 30, so that's a table of your fixed assets, and in that top table up there, you can see capital leases buildings, capital leases equipment, capital leases vehicles. So that's the different leases you had. This is the asset that's been capitalized and being depreciated. And over on page I'm sorry, that was the liabilities. That, what I just pointed out is the liabilities. The assets are on page 26. So on page 26, in that table, in the middle, right of use buildings, vehicles, and equipment. So the assets are on this page, and the liabilities are on the next page. And the net of those two figures is the 1.195. Something else you might be interested in is on page 47. And again, I told you that all of the funds are consolidated, and the MJ Cox Fund is consolidated as well. And on page 47 is a presentation of MJ Cox by itself. So you can see down towards the bottom of the page, the net position is $1.2 million for the MJ Cox. And it's mostly cash. Up in the asset section, $1.2 million in cash. Okay, and let's see. Oh, one thing I was going to point out on page 14. So page 14 is a comparison of your revenue, and you can see tuition, the very first thing on the page. It looks like your tuition dropped $2 million from $20 million to $18 million. But if you look over in the narrative under tuition and fees, the discounts have increased approximately the same difference. So I believe y'all awarded a discount or a scholarship last year, and that's why it appears that your tuition has dropped, but it actually, it didn't. And that's also pointed out on page 63. So turn to page 63. And that's a more detailed presentation of revenues. And you can see tuition, that first subtotal, tuition in 22 and tuition in 21, it's virtually the same. Also, another big difference that's on this page is state grants and contracts, and that's about in the middle of the page. It went up from 1.4 to 3,284,000. That's the 2.5 million. Most of that difference is the $2.5 million Medal of Honor Museum funds that you received that you haven't spent. So that's another thing that's sitting there in fund balance that hasn't been spent. Okay, the last thing I was going to point out is on page 66. So this kind of gets you back on the fund basis. It kind of tells you, takes that fund balance and breaks it out into what it's made up of fund-wise. So in the first column, unrestricted is a negative, but down there under renewals, the $14 million, that's the board reserves at the end of August. The next column is restricted expendable. That is that $2.5 million is included in that restricted figure, the $2,579,000. So those are grant funds that you haven't spent that are restricted, obviously. The Cox is down, is the endowment restricted, $1,123,000. That's the MJ Cox liquid assets. Debt service shows up in that column, $5,303. We were able to drop our debt service fund balance down because we paid some debt off. And so the fund balance, we don't have to maintain as high of a fund balance. So that's pretty much the high points. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, yes.
I'd just like to let everyone know, Judy informed us this year it will be her last year to audit us, and we would like to thank her for the service to the college.
Thank you very much for all your help.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
And I'll be available to help if y'all need any help in the transition.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. The next item of the next report would be the Building and IT Committee. Did they meet? Does anybody have a report? Okay. Okay. Sounds good. All right. And the Student Success Committee, Mr. Henderson, did you guys meet? Okay.
Just to go over just a few things. I don't want to read the whole report, but I want to thank Courtney and Tracy for outstanding job that they're doing with mental health safety resources for our students. I think it was outstanding. I think it was epic, as a matter of fact. That's 12% of the students' population utilizes 24/7 timely care, medical, and mental health services that the college is offering. Student requests for assistance, basic need, and emergency financial aid and textbook assistance, 99%. Online student-initiated forms implemented for the year of 21-22 went up. I want to thank Dr. King for the report that you gave. It goes right along with Dr. Wallace's report. Overall student success, we discussed that, and it's graded on a level from A and C, A through C. D is not on that on that level, but it is graded. Dr. King let us know that. Debbie, I want to thank you for your input. There's a lot of financial aid and services available to our students that I wasn't even aware of. And I want to say to the college and to the people that's working, to our instructors, to the teachers, that you all are frontline defense for mental health, because you see the students every day and you know them pretty well. So I want to say thank you to all of you, and thank you for your hard work. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for that report. All right, the next item would be the finance report. Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Chair Metzler. Tonight, you have 2 months of financial statements. We have November and December. Most of the information that you have is just typical financial reporting, nothing really out of the ordinary. But I do want to point out one important change that you'll find, and it's going to start with the December financial report. So if you'll turn back toward the latter portion, even the latter portion of the December report, to the monthly investment report. For years, we've invested a significant portion of the board reserves in CDs at local banking institutions. But as many of you know, recent CD returns have been abysmal. And within the past year, though, interest rates have started jumping up to the point where significant returns are now available for these reserve funds. But as institutional CD rates have risen, the rates have still lagged behind U.S. government securities. And as a result, in the month of December, we decided to pursue the purchase of U.S. Treasury bills and Treasury notes in an effort to improve the rate of return without taking on any additional risk. So when 2 CDs matured in December, the principal amounts were invested in U.S. security instruments. So not only does the addition of U.S. securities create a new breakout on this report, which you'll see on the second page of the monthly report, right after CDs, now we have a listing for investments in U.S. securities. But it also requires a new column on the report itself. So you may not can tell just looking at this report, but on the right-hand side now there are 2 separate columns, one titled book value, the other market value. For most of our asset holdings, that's irrelevant. It's one and the same. But now, because we own these U.S. government securities, on the Treasury notes, we're going to have a situation where literally every day the market value of those notes changes as interest rates change. So this is an effort to be transparent. We want to show at the end of each month what the true market value of that asset is. But just remember, the whole purpose of these funds are funds that we are wanting to invest them because we don't need ready access to them. That's why we don't mind putting it in a CD for 2 years or in a Treasury note for 2 years. We don't think we're going to need it. So if we hold that Treasury note to maturity, we get the full book value back from the asset. So the market value is really irrelevant considering the way we hold these assets. But we're just being transparent that yes, there will be fluctuations in interest rates, and you may see one month we didn't own these things for a week and a half, and sure enough, at the end of December, interest rates went up, which caused the market value of those holdings to go down. But don't worry about that. The value's not going to continue going down. As we move toward maturity, we will move back to the book value of the investment, and we should be in good shape. So you'll see this on all of our financials moving forward. As long as we have these U.S. government treasuries, we will have this separate category, and we'll have both a book value and a market value on the financial report. Are there any questions about that or anything else about the financials you have in front of you?
Questions? Okay. Thank you very much for your report. Back over here to the right page. Thick book tonight. Okay, the next item would be the quarterly external funding report. Debbie.
it's always fun to come quarterly and tell you about the exciting news in external affairs. And so I'm not going to go over all the parts of this. You have a copy in your packet, but just know that the NCTC Foundation was excited to host both a breakfast and a luncheon for our donors to thank them. And so we did that in November here and then also in Graham. Just an update. So far for this year, 2022-23, we've awarded 950 scholarships valued at over $530,000. And I just talked with Letitia today, and actually that number is up pretty significantly for the spring, so we'll be given a final update of those numbers as well. In Bowie, they are hosting the Dancing to the Stars. You know, it laid off for COVID in several years, but it's coming back on March the 25th. So if you want to mark your calendar at 6:30, it'll be on the Bowie Community Center. We've got lots of dancers, so they've been working hard. We're partnering with the Bowie Rotary, and they're really taking the lead in helping make that happen. So excited to see that event, and I know that you have it on your calendar, but the Starlight Gala is February the 24th at 6:30 at WinStar, and so be sure, and we'll look forward to seeing you all there as well. We talked a lot already about Red River Promise, and the other component of that is the scholarship funding for that. Excited to say that Jim and Jennifer Goldsworthy recently established an endowed Red River Promise scholarship. So as we continue to work with our donors, we're excited to see that continue to grow. NCTC Training Center at Champion Circle. We were saying NCTC Alliance, but we've realigned that so Champion Circle better fits the actual area. I just wanted to let you know that on March the 8th that we are hosting a business stakeholders meeting from 11:30 to 1. We're estimating about 100 business owners will be there. We're excited to get input from them as far as what their training needs are, but also excited to share what we're already doing there at Alliance, and we'll look forward to seeing how we can continue to recruit students and meet those training needs of those industry in that region. The foundation total assets is $15.4 million. This past quarter, we received over $523,000 in contributions. And excited to brag on SBDC, Lori Logan, I believe you're here. If I saw you over here. She provided a report that we have served 50 new businesses. We created 467 new jobs and supported 2,520 jobs. And then this capital infusion number is just amazing. Over $27 million that they helped local businesses receive. And that's a huge, huge impact in our region. So thank you, Lori, and your team.
Yeah, good job.
Then from a grants update, as you know, Donna Updegrove is our director of grants, but she works very closely with all our faculty and staff, depending on what grants that she's working on. 5 new grants have been awarded by the Texas Workforce Commission and the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board for a total of $1.4 million from TWC and over $529,000 from the Texas Coordinating Board. I'm not going to go over all of those, but you can see lots of equipment being purchased, lots of new programs being started through these fundings, and so appreciate all the work that the grants team is doing as well. And then I've asked Jake to come up, and I told him he only has a few minutes, but I wanted him to highlight some of his marketing in a glance, because really make an impact with what they're doing with marketing. So Jake Laughlin, if you'll come up.
Debbie always reminds me repeatedly to be brief, which sort of hurts my feelings a little bit, but I'm just kidding. So marketing and PR, we kind of fall in 2 camps. First camp is branding and creative. We're really trying to have consistent branding across the college, as well as really strong creative to try and put our best foot forward in everything that we're doing. And that's a really wide net that we cast in our team. You see exact numbers in front of you. Again, I won't go through all of them, but we do video production, photography, social media accounts, graphic design, our website, nctc.edu, as well as promotional products that we order for a bunch of different departments across the college, and our in-house print shop that we manage here on the Gainesville campus. And so the team that we have in marketing is super diverse, and really, really proud not only of the quantity that they're able to crank out, but the quality. The second camp that we work in as well is our ad strategy here at NCTC, where we're doing all of the ad creative as well as all of the ad buying for everything that we're doing across email marketing, billboards, social media, television, on and on and on and on. And what we're trying to do with all of that is put inquiry forms in front of potential students to get them in front of our recruiting team. And when we do that, we're not only able to have a really high-touch relationship with those students, but we're able to track, are our efforts working? We won't ever be able to know where every single student comes from, but when we have those forms, we get a much better sense of what ads did they respond to, and on and on and on. And so this past semester, we were able to track over 1,000 of our new students came from directly from those conversion funnels we put in place. So really, really, really proud of our team in marketing and everybody in external affairs as well as recruiting that worked on all of that. So thank you guys very, very, very much.
Very good. Thank you very much for that report. All right, the next item would be the spring enrollment report from Ms. Carroll.
I didn't know I was going to have to follow Jake and his very good speaking skills, so I'll be brief. But in your packet was our current enrollment as of January the 23rd, and included in those comparisons are our spring enrollment comparisons, our head count by semester, as well as race and ethnicity data. We may be able to continue to include that in the report, but based on some things that are going on at the state level, we may not be able to in the future. So I just wanted to bring that to, I just think it's important to say that. And another huge thank you to you as the board, and then also Dr. Wallace for, and this is kind of a sidebar because we have our students in the room, I just want to tell you thank you, and to the board, Dr. Wallace, and then also the students and Daisy Garcia that are here for giving me the opportunity to visit Austin and go to Community College Day with our students. So huge thank you to that group. It was exciting and fun, and I just wanted to give big kudos to that row back there. They're an amazing group of students, and I think they represented us well and our whole student population across the district, so thank you. Within your packet, the enrollment report that is provided does provide a spring 2023 enrollment head count of 6,849 students for all of our sessions. And at that time, whenever we pulled that data in January, we were 3% down compared to spring of 2022. And why I bring that to your attention, currently right now we are only 1.8% down compared to spring of last year because of some drops back out for non-payment, for non-attendance and things, some things that we're doing to improve student success. Because all of the reports this evening are very much related, some of the initiatives. So right now our current enrollment is 6,800 students for a decrease of only 1.8% compared to this time last year. So I think it's important to see that and how a couple of weeks and some of the initiatives that we are doing for student success are impacting our significant declines, but we are talking about those declines in enrollment, not just looking at the students in the classroom, but also looking at retention efforts, student success efforts, and initiatives that we are working toward. And things like Red River Promise, our success coaching models and things like that are really attributing to, those minimal declines, because whenever you look at our contact hours, our number of hours of students in the classroom, that's less, it's flat. It's less than 1% decline compared to this time last year. It's 0.7%. So I think it's important it's very much related to the shifting of our funding model for the state, in that NCTC is shifting its mindset of how we're not just looking at headcount data, we're looking at retention data and how it impacts our students, and really remembering wraparound services. We had a great meeting today of every area of the college to do a planning about talking about course scheduling, talking about retention, and looking at that data, and I think that's a direct result of why our numbers are improving, and it's really shifting toward a completion model within the classroom and then end of year, or end of their goal for credentials. So I just wanted to mention that. I think it's important to, not just looking at the headcount data, but actually the contact hour, because we have more students enrolling full-time and taking on, additional classes or whatever meets their needs. So I think it's important to look at that as well. And I've mentioned this previously, but we do have outreach efforts that we're doing that help toward those data shifts. And one great example, again, is that meeting that we had today. We have continuous meetings with instruction and student affairs, and every division in the college, we're all talking about the data and looking at it collectively. So I think that's a huge shift in even 5-10 years ago that we were not doing. We are looking at going back to a year-round scheduling model of having at least the schedule available as students are planning one semester, and then they can plan for the following semester. So we'll have more details to come as we, knock out those details of that. So if you have any questions, feel free. I'm here to answer those.
Yeah, I guess the question I have for either one of you really is, how do we comparative to other community colleges, both across the state and then ultimately in our region from a contact hour and head count, even though it is an ebb and flow situation and retention is super important. I understand.
So the state, from a state perspective, the state has not recuperated from COVID and the damage done to enrollment across all sectors. We've not yet seen a bounce back of any magnitude. We're beginning to see a soft return, I would call it. There is also a trend that we need to comprehend that is going to affect enrollment in the future, and that is birth rate and current high school graduation rates are declining in the state of Texas. So even without a COVID pandemic influence, universities and community colleges in Texas have known for a while that the enrollment trends we saw in 10, 11, 12, which were astronomical numbers, were the nuance, not the norm. And so I would argue that in the future, NCTC, for the foreseeable future, is going to see goals of 7,000, 7,500 students, given that we're going to complete them, given that the model is more impressed with getting a student what they need than it is a body count. And that means that our staff are doing more directive work, as you've heard from, rather than just body count, get them in the door. It's more meaningful work. So I think you're going to see that conversation statewide. Trajectory is everyone's still flat or down. There's a few nuances where some colleges may be up in credit, but then they're down on the non-credit side and it's evening out. But none of us have totally recouped yet. And I think, from my opinion, is we're never going to see the numbers for several years we saw in the peak of higher ed for a while.
Okay.
And we are actively looking at our county data that is in your packet of the aging populations, those that have some college, or those that, like Dr. Wallace mentioned about, our diminishing number of high school graduates. Mm-hmm. We're looking at national and state data on that. And from a marketing perspective, also looking at who's our student, who is that? Is it the high school graduate? Right. And if you look at the data, it's really not. It's those that are non-traditional for the most part. So we're trying to actively, as a team at NCTC, look at all of that data and making sure that if we're aligning to what our region tells us in that data.
And also, a point of clarification, the data we show is still the old formula funding model data. We're not collecting at the rate you see before you yet, the continuing ed and those things that are going to be now fundable in the future that we're still educating. And so if you do, now the OSAs would be in here, but you would not see, for example, the CDL program, if we had a cohort of those students, wouldn't be reflected in these numbers yet either.
We're working very closely with Dean Flushy
yes.
and Continuing Ed and trying to align the services and we've been doing that with our main stop also, trying to align those services for Continuing Ed students that are similar to what we provide for our credit side of students, and then also making sure that we're documenting and creating occupational skills award for non-credit. We did have an instructional council this past week that we are moving forward with, and trying to position ourselves to be prepared for those reporting requirements, for those credential requirements that someone may want on the non-credit side, and making them affordable also for students.
And normally there's been a connection between enrollment and concerns of budget. We've always been so driven by tuition and fees and driven by that narrative of contact hour formula funding. I would remind you, too, that we are at a hold harmless right now. So the state has already held us harmless for this biennium across all sectors. So we will receive the same appropriations we received last year, no matter what, pretty much. That's part of this notion of hold harmless while we're figuring out the new model. That, in turn, for a lot of colleges means an increase if you consider that they have all suffered enrollment decline. So if you had an enrollment decline and you're held harmless, you're actually garnering more funds than you would have under the old model. So everyone's excited about the notion of hold us harmless, let's get the new funding mechanism in place, and then we're able to kind of retool ourselves and create these new reports that are going to be very advantageous to the future of the funding model. But so financially, this is the best time to find that niche, to get those services in place, because everyone's being held at a harmless rate right now.
Thank you. All right, thank you for your report. All right, the next item, item number 6 on our agenda is the consent agenda items. Are there any items A through D that we need to pull off and consider independently? Any Regent? No? All right. So if not, then we'll go ahead and accept a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented. I have a motion by Mr. Hayne. Do I have a second? A second by Mr. Henderson. Additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, the next item is under discussion and possible action is number A, the consideration of participating agreement with the City of Gainesville for the reinvestment zone to establish a tax increment reinvestment zone by Mr. Baugh. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Chairman Messler, we've got the City of Gainesville is requesting to create a tax increment reinvestment zone, which is known as a TERS. Yeah. We're going to refer to it as a TERS.
Is that mic on, Robbie? Sorry. Oh, no. Maybe just talk.
Okay.
Raise it. There you go. Maybe.
I think Dr. Miller sabotaged it when he was in. Can you hear me now?
Better.
A little better? Okay, anyway, we'll talk about the tax increment reinvestment zone, which is going to be called a TERS zone as we move on later tonight in the presentation. But it's for the area around the Gateway Industrial Park that's being established. And NCTC has an opportunity to participate in that TERS creation. So we have our city manager here, Barry Sullivan. It's going to be here to explain the details of what the TERS is and also what the project and the financing plan would be as well. So Barry, if you'd come on up.
I appreciate y'all giving me this opportunity to visit with y'all today about the TERS. The city approved our first tax increment reinvestment zone a couple months ago. And what that does is allows us to put money or an increment of the future growth of the tax rate in that area towards this TERS zone. And then that money can be utilized to pay for public infrastructure, and public infrastructure in this deal is for roads, water, sewer. It does not cover electric or any of the private entities. We look at putting the money in 3 different tiers. One is to pay to improve a highway, 1202. $5 million to pay a local match for TxDOT to put a bridge over the railroad at that location. And then the next area is to pay money towards that public infrastructure. The developer will repaid up to 80% of their cost of installing that. And then the final area, and the only area that the city can, that no other entity puts in, y'all don't put into that, only the city puts into this, is a 380 agreements where we can put money from the TERS, the city's portion from the TERS in that, and we could use that to enhance businesses, which y'all been talking about economic development, doing things that can get these kids in. This should hire around or over 1,000 people. And a big thing that could really help the college, where it can help us right now, that area, about 280 acres, is being taxed at $174,000. That's the taxable value, not what we get, but the taxable value And in 25 years, we anticipate the taxable value of this area being 622 million. So because the types of businesses that come in, the city saw it important to look at this and do this because they're going to put in a rail component, which is going to get us the diversification and get us the types of jobs where, one, they have to be more skilled to do them, so the wages go up. And secondly, they generally have to have big buildings. They have to have rail spurs, which means the value of those buildings are up high, and that brings in additional property tax. I brought with me today Kyle Sikorsky from P3, and he's going to be giving a presentation a little bit more in detail, not only on this particular TERS, but also generally what a TERS does and how it will work, and get into the details of those mechanisms. And once he's finished with his presentation, or during his presentation, we're both here for questions.
Thank you, Barry. Good evening. My name is Kyle Sikorsky. I'm with P3 Works. Like Barry said, we're the economic development consultant for the city of Gainesville. So we've been working on multiple projects. We've been working on this one with Barry since summer of last year, or maybe even a little earlier than that. So we're very excited to be at this point. We only represent cities and municipalities across the state, so I'm not here representing the developer. I'm here representing the city and their request to you tonight. So what is a TERS? A TERS is, at the end of the day, if you boil it down, an economic development tool that cities have in their arsenal to encourage development that they would like to see. It's governed under Chapter 311 of the Texas Tax Code. It's a very beneficial tool in that it requires the developer to put skin in the game. And so how it works essentially is the city creates a TERS. At the point that it's created, it establishes a base value. So Barry mentioned the $170,000 taxable value today. That is the base value that has been established. And so all the property taxes that you receive from the value today continues to flow back to your funds. So your current dollars and what you're currently budgeted for is not affected. What it does is it takes a percentage of the incremental value that is created from new development after the creation of the zone, and it puts it into a TERS fund to pay for public infrastructure. And so the city has created reinvestment zone number 1 to go for 25 years, and the city has agreed to put 50% of their incremental revenue into the zone. We've already had a meeting with the hospital district. They have also agreed to put 50% of their revenue in for the next 25 years, and we have a meeting with the college next week or 2 weeks from now as well to request their participation. And so it's been a long process, but we're excited to be here. Really, the most beneficial part of this is the risk to the college is very minimal. So if this development does not occur, the College Board is not affected. You're still receiving the same funds you were. You're not issuing any kind of debt, and so if the project doesn't perform, it's not like you have bondholders that are coming after other funds that you have. The only revenue source to pay this infrastructure is, one, the developer's private financing, but then the TERS fund to reimburse the developer for a portion of that infrastructure. And the beautiful thing, at the end of the life of the zone ends and 100% of the increment begins flowing back to the college. You typically see these go for about 30 years. So to have one at only 25 years, I think is great. We've worked very closely with the developer to make sure we're not dedicating too much. We want to make sure that, the College Board is able to maintain as much money as you can of that incremental revenue. And so there's been feasibility analyses that have been done. Those are included in the project and finance plan. We can certainly provide more detail if you'd like. But by taking the city increment in conjunction with the college, the hospital, and the county, we're able to create a financing source that pays for public infrastructure, because really, from the developer's perspective, if they don't have that TERS fund available, this project is not financially feasible. Barry mentioned the additional rail infrastructure that's required. That infrastructure amount is about $7 to $10 million. So before even getting to any of the public infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, drainage, they're already committing that $7 to $10 million just in rail infrastructure to bring in this type of high quality industrial that we're going to see. So this is the TERS boundary that's been created, like Barry referenced. It's off of FM 1202 by the old Camp House historical site. Better picture here is the master plan that the developer has put together. This doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be the exact location of every single building, but we asked the developer to say, we asked him to put together a master plan and tell us what he envisions this project could be. So you'll see there's lots of buildings on here that you'll see all the rail infrastructure as well. There's already been lots of interest in this site as well, and so we're very excited to see this take off rather quickly. Here's some more details. I know that master plan has a lot of small writing, but the TERS in this industrial rail park could support up to 5.7 million square feet of new buildings. It's already zoned for industrial rail, so it's going to help promote manufacturing coming in. And you'll see that we have an added taxable value of $400 million. That's $400 million in 2023 value. When you look at what's the taxable value going to be in 25 years at build out with inflation, with we put a very minimal 2% inflation, and we assume an economic downturn every 2 years, so no inflation every 2 years. Over every 10-year period. And with that very minimal amount, actually it's 3%, I apologize, but with that very minimal amount, we anticipate the taxable value at the end of the life of the zone to be $622 million. So again, you're giving up a percentage, but think about instead of collecting 100% of the taxable value of $170,000, now you're going to get to collect 50% of a $600 million development, and at the end of the life of the zone, now you're collecting 100% of that new $600 million in value. There's some more details on this slide that kind of lists what we anticipate, the developer anticipates bringing in. I won't go into the details of all of that, but it lists all of the various public infrastructure and also private infrastructure that they'll be bringing in. So I touched on this already, but this kind of gives a good visual of how we anticipate this value coming online. Really, we put the build out of the whole development at around 10 to 15 years. I would say that's on the more, I would say it's a very realistic build out for this development. I could actually see it going further or quicker. Good news again to the college district is if this performs faster or if it performs slower, there's no impact to you other than the amount of the value that you're receiving every year. And so if this project just doesn't happen at all, you're not going to see any effect from the college board. If it overperforms and it builds out much quicker than we anticipate, or the values increase much quicker than we anticipate, in your participation agreement, we put in a dollar cap. And so if the project overperforms, it's not a blank check that's going to this TERS fund. You have a set dollar figure in your participation agreement. So once you hit that dollar cap, then it's gone, and we've got that number included in this next slide. So you can see the various entities that we're requesting participation from. If you're looking from the college district perspective, a 50% contribution over 25 years with the build out that we've assumed equates to a total contribution of just a little over $3.9 million. But I'll point out that in addition to giving away that 3.9, you're now receiving a new $3.9 million that you didn't have on your books before due to this successful project. So the total contribution that we anticipate going into the TERS fund is $47 million. Again, this is not a blank check to a developer. We already have a TERS agreement that's going to be approved next week. That indicates that only 80% of the public infrastructure will be reimbursed to the developer. And so if they do not build the infrastructure, they do not get the money. And if it overperforms and we're able to pay them off quicker, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're giving away all this $47 million. These are just the caps that you have in your project and finance plan. So this is just a visual of the previous chart that shows the annual contribution to get to that $3.9 million. The college district is the bottom line on this graph. So you see at build out, you're averaging just under $200,000 a year in annual contribution. Barry touched on this earlier. We have 3 tiers of project costs. I wouldn't rate one as more important than the other. We just break them out into tiers because, as Barry mentioned, there's certain projects that you cannot participate in. And so that being tier number 3, the city can enter into Chapter 380 grants and use TERS funds from that to help incentivize additional development that they would like to see, and that can pay for private infrastructure, but that is only funds being dedicated to the TERS fund from the city. So no college dollars would go to tier 3. They would only go to tier 1 and to tier 2. And so you can see we have a match of $5 million on tier 1. I believe the EOPC for that bridge is closer to $25 million, but that's your local match, and you anticipate TxDOT coming in and funding the rest of that particular project. But if TxDOT sees local funds ready, you can kind of get moved up the list a little bit quicker, and so that'll help get that bridge online sooner. Tier 2 is your biggest pot of money in terms of public infrastructure costs. So this is what you think of when I say public infrastructure: roads, water, sewer, storm, engineering, all soft costs related to installation. That is estimated by the developer to be $24 million. Again, they're only eligible to receive up to 80% of that tier 2 infrastructure costs, and so we have a very detailed draw process that we will make the developer go through to prove up their costs, prove that they've paid their invoices, they have lien releases, they have all bills paid affidavits. We'll have a very detailed process that we go through administratively to make sure funds are being spent in the way that you intend them to. And that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions that the board has, and we're just really excited for this participation and seeing this project move forward.
I do have a question for our staff. Is there anything in our policy that prohibits or allows for, or anything specific to this? Okay.
Yeah, the policy you currently have does not have restrictions on TERS. Where you have restrictions by policy are more in the area of abatement.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. All right. Mm-hmm.
Just a point of clarification on your slide about 3 slides back, perhaps, where it was showing the revenue, maybe one more, there we go, that other one, that one. Is that a cumulative over the period of the full TERS? Correct, that's cumulative, right. So just reminding the board, I mean, this is just a point of clarification in my head, if nothing else as well, is $600 million additional dollars in valuation garners under our current tax rate probably about $500,000 in taxes for the college. That's why we're that lowest little blue line at the bottom, because we're the lower of all the taxing entities. So just.
I would like to point out that is the maximum, though, that you will.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Unlike a tax abatement, where if you give a tax abatement for 10 years, it's whatever happens to be at the end. If that comes in year 15, you all are done putting into the TERS. So that is the max amount that will ever go in.
That
so
three.
That's another
3.913, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good. All right. Any other questions? All right, well, we would, in order to approve this, we would need a motion to improve the TARS, let's see, agreement with the City of Gainesville, and we need a motion to do that as presented. So a motion by Mr. Hand. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Morris. All right, additional discussion at this time? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your right hand, please. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. All right. Thank you very much. All right, the next item would be the consideration of a tax abatement for the 35 in Liberty DBA Tractor Bob's. Robbie?
Yes, as you recall, at the last board meeting last month, we had this on the agenda, and our contract was not worded correctly. We had some errors in the contract, so now we have a good, clean contract for this tax abatement. I think what you have in your packets are the marked up version. I've got the clean copy, or actually Carla's got the clean copy at her desk. So anyway, it's a tax abatement for that 35 in Liberty, which is doing business as Tractor Bob's, and they're going to occupy and repurpose the old outlet mall. And as you can see there, they're going to have a total investment of $31 million over 3 years for modernization and remodeling the land and the build out. They estimate up to 390 employees over 5 years. And the document application request also meets all of your governing board's guidelines and criteria for tax abatements. And anyway, they're asking for 10 years, but your guidelines say that the maximum is 7 years. Right. So your options are to approve the tax abatement for 7 years or deny the tax abatement.
Yes.
Madam Chairman, just as a point of clarification too, our additional data, we have been in conversation with Tractor Bob's for the continuing education and the training of those employees. So there is already conversations being had with their CEO and myself and then others as they come on board for providing that workforce training for them as well. So that's just an additional piece of information.
That was a question I had, so very good. Okay. Any questions for Robbie before he move for a motion, if there is one? Okay, do I have a motion? Mr. Henderson made the motion to accept the tax abatement as presented. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Ott. Additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, now we'll go on to the next item is consideration of matters incident related to declaring the exception to reimburse expenditures, and so on and so on. It's a long one. For resolution pertaining thereto. So, Dr. Miller, why don't you?
Madam Chairman, may I just say how much we appreciate our IT department?
Yes, thank you. Always there to help us.
There wasn't a name next to this agenda item, and I guess I was the only one who could interpret what this agenda item says. But for several months, I've been having discussions with the Finance Committee about funding options that would allow the college to complete some much-needed facility improvements. With the committee's blessing, we would like to present information to the entire board about a funding structure that is available to state entities such as NCTC, but to my knowledge, it's never been previously utilized here at the college. Maintenance tax notes are listed in the board policy manual under CAH Legal as a funding mechanism available for, and I quote, the maintenance, repair, rehabilitation, or replacement of heating, air conditioning, water, sanitation, roofing, flooring, electric, or other building systems of existing school properties. I've asked representatives from Specialized Public Finance to speak with us tonight about the advantages of utilizing maintenance tax notes to fund facility improvements here on the Gainesville campus. Stephen Adams and Paul Jason are here. You may recognize them. They were here about a year ago helping us with the sale of tuition revenue bonds for the purchase of the Flower Mound campus. And tonight, they'll introduce you to maintenance tax notes and hopefully answer any questions you might have about this unique financing option. Stephen?
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Stephen Adams and Paul Jason here, and we did present this to the Finance Committee, and we were going to present it at your iced out meeting, so we're here tonight. I'd also like to point out that the bond council wrote the agenda language, not us.
Thank you.
But anyway, let me just talk a little bit about the agenda item first, because what the agenda item is a resolution, a reimbursement resolution. So if you spend money out of your general fund or anywhere else before we close on these, you can then reimburse that money with these with tax-exempt bond proceeds. So that's what the agenda item is. Okay. The actual sale date for this would be at your next board meeting, assuming you allow us to go ahead with this tonight. So what we're doing tonight is walking through the board with this opportunity, and we've got a handout, and I think, is there one online? We also have hard copies of this if anybody wants one. So just let us know. So anyway, let's go to the next page, please. So everything we've run tonight, we've used a 10-year term. We can go, I think, out to 25 years, which we've done for some other colleges. But as Van mentioned, we can only spend this money on things that we can't build new walls, for example. So it is for maintenance for your facilities. And what happens, and you'll see some other colleges that have done this, you know, as colleges get older, these repairs and maintenance get so far behind that they just need to do a catch-up. And this is one way to finance that catch-up over 10 years. And we have calculated that the tax rate increase would be 0.0017 cents for the amount that we have done tonight, and we've got some numbers for that in a minute. And if you approve this tonight, we'll come back at your March board meeting with some bids from banks, and then we'll close April the 27th after these are approved by the Attorney General. The next page, I think Van's probably gone over most of this. We can go up to 20 years, it says here. The interest rate's comparable to general obligation bonds because we do have a pledge on your property taxes, even though you don't have to pay it from your property taxes. And so, for example, if you were to sell this at your next meeting, when you did your budget process, you know, later this summer, you could determine, are you going to pay for it out of your property taxes? Are you going to pay for it out of other revenues or a combination thereof? And you can do that every year. So there's no requirement to do that, pay for it out of your property taxes. There is an opportunity to do that if you'd like to. If you do that, that payment is not part of the rollback calculation. Next page, please. Van asked us to look at some other entities both around the state and nearby that have used these. I would like to point out that maintenance tax notes for community colleges are different than tax notes for cities and are different for maintenance tax notes for school districts. They're similar but different. So, for example, cities can build things with tax notes, but they can't go beyond 7 years. School districts can not use their property taxes for any of theirs, so anything that a school district does that goes on the INS rate has to be voted. So a little bit different, but very similar in how they work. There's just one council action required, so there's no publication requirement or election or anything like that, but there are, of course, limitations on what you can use the money for. And you can see a lot of community colleges around the state have used these in the last 2 or 3 years. Again, it's just a catch up on deferred maintenance. It's kind of probably just built up over time. Next page, please. So this is our assumptions. I know this is small, but I'm going to talk about it so you don't have to read it. To get to our 0.0017 tax rate impact. So what we've done, we've taken your assessed valuation, which grew really rapidly this last year at 24%, but we've ramped that back to 8% for next year and 3% thereafter. We've taken your existing debt into account, and then we've got the tax note, the maintenance tax notes of $2,045,000. That provides $2 million for your projects and $45,000 for all the costs of issuance, which would include our firm and bond counsel and other counsel that may be representing a bank. So you take all that into account, and if you decided to pay this out of taxes, which that decision would be made during your budget process, it would be 0.0017 on the tax rate. Next page, please. This is the sources and uses of funds that I went over, that you get $2 million for yourself and then $45,000 for the cost of issuance. The next page is a timetable of events that just goes through the process that we're going through, that we would go between now and your next meeting in March and solicit bids from banks for this, and then close in April. I think we have one more slide just to kind of bring you up to speed on interest rates. I know you can't see that very, very far right, but rates actually have come down a full % on tax-exempt side since November. So moving in our way. We don't know where they'll go, but you can see going back, you got to go back to the 60s, and that's what's on the far left to get rates where we are right now. And then you can see the mid-80s, that those of us who are my age remember all that inflation and high interest rates. So anyway, we'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have. That is correct.
So, if we had projections of the next 10-year period that exceeded that, can we look at an increase in the rate that you are currently quoting?
You could, unless the tax rate continued to grow. Because what's probably going to happen over time is your tax rate's going to have to come down. And we would try to keep it level if you were to issue tax notes, so that, because your tax rate's going to have to come down on the O&M side because of the way the state law works. So we have clients that sell tax notes or maintenance tax notes every year to try to keep their tax rate level over time, maybe ahead of a bond election, or just to protect revenues, since that's going to be a dwindling revenue source. So it really is a function of the growth in your assessed valuation. But if your assessed valuation stopped growing, yeah, that would be an increase.
If we wanted to come back and look at this mechanism in 2 years or 5 years and say, we now have need for another $3 million and use this mechanism to do it, can we do that?
So long as the legislature doesn't change it, and they're always looking at things like this.
So assuming things,
The answer is yes under current laws, yes. You could do it every year if you wanted to.
So we have a laundry list of things that, infrastructure things I know that have been talked about before at various committee meetings, and yes, and it's considerably more than $2 million. So I think that's a very good point and question to understand, that currently we could do that. Oh yeah, it's extremely low.
one sentence where we
Okay, so that .0017, okay, to get there, we took your existing debt, we added this on it, we assumed 8% growth in your AV for this year, which is on top of what we just had was a 24, and then we went down to 3% after that. So that's where we took that growth in a little bit and structured the debt with interest only, and then a full freight to get to that.
It's if you go back to the slide, Alex, that was the list of other colleges that utilize this. I have to point this out, ladies and gentlemen. Alamo colleges that used these garners $280 million of levied traditional M&O every year. Dallas College, who has utilized these, already garners $370 million in M&O rate every year. Austin, I mean, these are now Texarkana and then Tyler are more conservative in their generated, but it's interesting to me that those that have taken advantage of it are already what you would consider to be wealthy. And so that's not to be a judgment statement. It's an interesting statement to me to say that it's underutilized perhaps where it could be in these rural communities that are really needing to do infrastructure growth for colleges that are 50, 60, 70-year-old facilities. And so that's just interesting.
And also blessed with the third lowest tax rate in the state.
That is correct.
For
right
colleges. So if we were to look at a bigger rate, if you will, because if I understand it correctly, a long-term look at our facilities repair requirements over the next 10 years are probably closer to $6 million, not $2 million, which is why the question immediately about can we redo this because of the needs we're going to have to keep this campus functional, which is this campus, by the way. We're not talking about any other campus but this one.
And another thing we had to consider when we were looking at our projects and needs, there are very strict rules for about renovations. I think one example, we were talking at the dorm about wanting to add on what essentially would be like a washateria room, basically attached to an existing building, but it's a new slab, it's new, that's new construction. And I went over our list of projects with the bond council, and they checked the legality to make sure every one of them met the legal requirements, and they said they're all fine.
Good.
I'm not worried about that part. I'm worried about long-term.
Exactly.
We do this, and in a year or 2 years, we have to go back and do it again. And in 2 years, we have to go back and do it again to keep up with the repair requirements. These are old buildings and old infrastructure and old pipes and all the rest of that stuff that eventually you got to dig them up and you got to replace them. And that's part of the program.
And like you said, like if you'll look up there, Alamo did this in 2020 and then 2 years later in 22. So yeah, there'd be nothing that would keep us as long as it's still a legitimate legal avenue allowed by the state. We could come back 1, 2, 3 years from now and do a similar issue all over again.
Other questions?
Are you comfortable, Dr. Miller, with the rate that he's suggesting as well? That's what you would recommend as well? Yes. And then again, like he just said, we can come back and.
Oh yeah, that's why.
Well, we can't manage more than the $2 million a list of things that we need to do at one time. Just from a sheer all the things that go along with the projects. You know.
The logistics.
Considering we're building a museum and
yeah, there's lots going on.
Yeah, it's going to get complicated.
So what's the action item for tonight?
So I really probably should read this whole thing since this is quite legal.
Right.
So we're going to consider all matters incident and related to the declaring of the exception to reimburse expenditures with the proceeds of future debt, including the adoption of a resolution pertaining thereto. So that's the actual action item, and if I'm not mistaken, this action item honestly, is to set this up for a future vote, but be able to reimburse ourselves for the items and expenses that we have now until that vote actually takes place and funds are.
So if we read this into a motion, that is what we need to accomplish to get this done?
I think
Basically,
that,
we're making a motion to put him to work and get us actual data, and we vote on it next week.
that is
But
correct.
this verbiage does
With,
that. It's not obligated.
but anything we would
That's right.
spend would be reimbursable. That's what this
That's what
resolution
this
really
is.
does.
So
Yes, correct.
After
if
today.
I say I move and read this, we have now obligated ourselves to only to look at a vote on whether or not we'd like to do this.
That
That's
is correct.
all we're doing, for you to
That's-
come back and present and say, yay, we're gonna do it or not do it. Okay.
Firm up everything.
I move that we consider all matters incident and related to declaring expectation to reimburse expenditures with proceeds of future debt, including the adoption of a resolution pertaining thereto.
So we have a motion by Mr. Hayen. Do we have a second? Second, thank you very much. Okay, additional discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right, the next item is the consideration of calling the board election for May 6, 2023. So as chairman, I've been notified that the NCTC, by the NCTC election administrator, that we do have a contested election, and therefore we must move forward with this evening in approving an order for election. Including in your materials this evening is that order which, for the purpose that we'll be electing 2 regents to the NCTC Board of Regents. Place 6 and place 7 are open for election. In addition, we will be required to have an additional board meeting on February the 28th, 2023 at 12 noon in order to consider the execution of the order calling a regents election on May 6, 2023, and to consider the approval of appointment of election judges. This meeting cannot take place prior to the 28th. For this evening's business, I would offer an order of the election for consideration and would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion to have a board election on May 6, 2023.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Ott. Do we have a second? Mr. Henderson offers the second. Additional discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right. The next item is executive session, and I do believe we'll need to have one of those this evening. So let me find my paper if I need to read. So at this time, the board will now recess this regular meeting and go directly into executive session as provided for in the following Texas Governmental Code. Section 551.076, deliberations regarding security devices or security audits. So at this time, I'll ask everybody except the cabinet can stay, but everybody else, if you'll please exit, and we'll see if you're there at the end of